Why are there so many World of Warcraft players switching to old school RuneScape? You must have noticed them, right? Lurking around the Grand Exchange, trying to parse on a goblin, wondering where their ability bars are, and asking how Jagex is managing to update the game rather than re-releasing the same exact content over and over and over again. I sure did, because I'm one of those WoW players. A year and a half ago, after around half a month of MMO soul searching, I found Old School RuneScape. I had quit WoW after Mythic raiding for around a decade for various reasons. I was sick of the short-form, seasonal ethos of the game, devaluing any and all of my progression, sick of the only valuable content being instanced, bored of the binary itemization and samey loot, and disheartened by Blizzard's complacency with the classic incarnation of the game. Clearly, I wasn't the only one. Madseason, Guzu, Savix, and more have since begun their first steps into this beloved, curated sandbox. What about RuneScape seems to have translated for the World of Warcraft player, and why? First, we must acknowledge where these WoW creators come from. Unlike myself, most of them are classic WoW players, an old-school 2004 incarnation of World of Warcraft, much like old-school RuneScape is of RuneScape. Unlike OSRS though, this version of World of Warcraft is following the timeline of WoW itself. Blizzard has been updating classic WoW every few months with new patches and eventually the very same expansions that released years ago. The initial release in 2018 is now entering the Mists of Pandaria expansion and resembles Retail WoW, the modern game, much more than it does Classic WoW or Vanilla WoW, the version from 2004. It's interesting to imagine a version of Old School RuneScape that just kind of began releasing all the same updates, eventually ruining the game for the very same players that returned to it because it lacked those updates. Blizzard understood and saw this as the player base continued to shrink. Therefore, they opted for the seasonal servers that remixed the standard classic vanilla WoW experience. The Season of Mastery, and eventually the Season of Discovery. These year-long servers run down the line of all the same patches that were released between 2004 and 2006, with some updates. The latter, Season of Discovery, or SOD, introduced runes and granted all kinds of player power in the form of new abilities and many old ones from future expansions, as well as reworked some of the raids and even added one new raid toward the end. It was an interesting experiment. Finally, Blizzard released the Classic Anniversary servers, so just Vanilla Classic again, for a second, or some would argue fourth time. That's the first point to take note of. These creators love WoW. Even I, to a certain extent, still do as well, especially Classic, a version of the game that I think is most tangibly an MMORPG. It's wonderful, yet regardless of your love for it, anything exceptional becomes dry over time, especially when not allowed to exist in our mind. Being fed the same thing, as great as it may be, over and over again doesn't foster a larger community, it pushes those sick of it away. And the amount becoming sick only increases in time. The repeated cycles of Classic aren't getting any fresher, and next time Blizzard relaunches Classic servers, chances are they'll see even less popularity. Similarly, Blizzard has floated the idea of a Classic Plus. This has been a long-running desire from the player base. Instead of re-releasing the same content, why not add truly new content to the game? In many ways, SOD was experimenting in that regard. Sadly, I'm a bit concerned with this. First, Blizzard's survey that introduced this idea was filled with nothing even remotely interesting systemically. It had a whole host of quality of life features such as account-wide collections and graphical improvements. Essentially, they were pitching retail WoW features alongside what Blizzard does most confidently: instanced content, new raids, dungeons, and so on. I suppose that's what people want, but I also think that this will kill the game down the line. You can add new skills, new classes, however, disregarding the architecture that makes most of these things function is an issue. It may work well for retail, but that's because the modern version of WoW is competitive and singular in its vision. It has an exceptional combat system that is the sole point of interaction with the rest of the game. By comparison, Classic WoW is Emergent. It wouldn't be far-fetched to say that it is defined by its leveling experience more so than its endgame. Because endgame in Classic WoW, the farming for pre-raid bis and then raid logging, isn't the most evocative or unique feature, leveling through the enormous uninstanced open world, forming groups to take down elites and brave difficult quests, finding ways to solo bosses, just running through the dense jungles and open plains. That is classic WoW. The endgame is held together by emergent interactions never intended by the developers and seemingly never acknowledged since. The interpersonal relations of managing 40-odd raiders, the faction collusion, the war effort that saw, in my opinion, one of the best game series ever created around it. Even the collective flight paths to gather meticulously timed world buffs, these are the heartbeat of the game that aren't retained by just improving graphics, adding instanced player housing, and a new class. This survey saw Blizzard double down on things that are neat, I guess, but aren't what actually makes classic WoW good. With all of that out of the way, we must also acknowledge the lull that Classic is currently in. The anniversary servers are chugging along with the 100-odd thousand players still logging weekly, Season of Discovery has ended, and the modern version of Classic WoW, Jesus Christ, there are so many versions, is entering an expansion that most original players aren't likely to return to. During this lull, people want something, and that something, for whatever reason, is Oldschool Runescape. Runescape and WoW have a combative history with one another. I'm sure older players remember just how competitive and defensive these two groups were. The Runescape versus World of Warcraft videos on the fledgling website known as YouTube were a not uncommon thing to see. The arguments at a lunch table, the friendships broken or lost, all of it laid a foundation for many experiences in the mid-2000s. And a singular truth was birthed from the din of childhood tribalism. World of Warcraft is better because it's for people whose parents are generous enough to front $15 a month for a subscription. Meanwhile, RuneScape is the kids game for losers who can only get $5, or none bucks, stuck in the beleaguered free-to-play worlds like jobless middle school peasants. At that point, World of Warcraft was on top of the world. It was reaching its subscriber peak and growing. While RuneScape was undeniably a cultural force, it was always the lesser of the two. Times have kind of changed since then. World of Warcraft's popularity, while still at the top, has waned. The game has stagnated, failing to reach a new audience. Meanwhile, RuneScape has died and been rebirthed twice. Oldschool Runescape has not only been growing, it has been thriving, especially in the past 2 years where the player count has almost doubled. This is thanks to exceptional updates focusing on the early and mid-game experience and external community-driven marketing from creators and Jagex alike. Leagues, the limited-time Season of Discovery-esque but way crazier game mode released in late 2024, saw more than 200,000 concurrent players, and now the game is reaching up those figures without the help of leagues at all. For reference, this is more concurrent players than the total individual raid logs in Classic WoW's Anniversary Edition every week. In July, we're seeing the release of the final part of the newest continent, Varlamore, and shortly after that, Oldschool's first entirely new skill, Sailing, which is expanding the world in ways never before seen in the game. Is that all it takes for the conversion for the WoW player to give it a go? Not entirely. OSRS offers certain similarities in experience that are worth mentioning, like the emphasis on emergent gameplay. Emergence is when unique, surprising interactions arise from engagement with standard systems in a video game. For example, in WoW Classic, it was the coordination between half a dozen guilds to time their world buff drops for the most amount of players to make sure there are no overlaps. These are methods of interaction never explicitly designed by the developers. They emerge thanks to player need and creativity. My favorite emergence system in Classic WoW was learning Dire Maul tribute runs on my Hunter all the way back in 2019. Not only was it a difficult solo challenge, but selling the loot and buffs to different players was a really cool way to earn money. These things don't exist in retail WoW. The game has been meticulously designed to be balanced and competitive. Therefore, any outliers such as this are immediately patched out. There's even a refrain popularized by players calling out this behavior. Fun detected, they say in unison as Blizzard removes an emergent mechanic that may trivialize something. In OSRS, this happens less. The line between exploit and emergence is thinner. It is also encouraged with the existence of the wilderness, a zone where PvP is enabled and upon dying, you drop your loot. If you are not the aggressor, or unskulled, you retain 3 of your most expensive items, and if you are skulled, the aggressor, you lose everything. There is a tangible risk-reward in the wilderness that makes it unlike anything else in theme park MMOs. It has singles areas for one-on-ones and multi-combat zones for group fights, fostering a truly sprawling and occasionally terrifying environment. It has its issues, but is ultimately a totally unique element of RuneScape. The open world PvP during Classic WoW's heyday was kind of similar to this. If you decided to play on a PvP server, it wasn't uncommon to run into roving warbands of bloodthirsty players farming honor points on random people. It created a hide-and-seek leveling experience that definitely got tiresome, but was pretty crazy nonetheless. This system is only begotten to Wilderness in Oldschool, so it's a bit more manageable there. Of course, in PvP, death is nowhere near as punishing in WoW as you only lose time, but the general ethos of open PvP is worth considering as a point of interest. OSRS has emergence that extends far past PvP too. It wouldn't be far-fetched to suggest that the vast majority of PvE bosses in RuneScape have emergent mechanics defining them, whether it be safe-spotting Dagannoth Kings, butterflying Akka, soloing Cox, and anything in between. Even the skilling in OSRS is often thought of as an emergent experience thanks to tick manipulation being a valid method for a lot of players. It also has an effective blend of communality and solo expression. Some of the most difficult content in OSRS is solo. However, the experience of playing the game itself is a lot more communal. Not in the sense that it demands grouping, that's not the only method of multiplayer communality, just being around others is enough. Because the game isn't linear in its progression, it's a sandbox. No zone is ever out-leveled or outright devalued. You are just as likely to see high-level players in Varrock, the second city most players go to, as you are in the elven city of Prifdinas. Mario. Not only does this make the game feel more alive, it also creates the emergent experience of seeing someone, as soon as you zone in, wearing way cooler shit than you are, and giving you something to aspire to as a result. This is of course dead in retail WoW thanks to the overabundance of cosmetic overrides applying inane visuals to anyone, anywhere, making it impossible to tell if someone is a badass because they cleared a mythic raid or just swiped their credit card or farmed an old piece of content while watching YouTube videos on another monitor. Classic WoW, at least the original version, didn't have cosmetic overrides, so being able to actually see what someone is wearing lent a credible aura of authenticity to the game world and its player base. Everything felt of that world, and the items being worn gained an aesthetic value. They were recognized. The legendary armaments were legendary. That has since faded in time thanks to the repeated launches and eventual mastery of all the content, but it did exist at one point. Because it's persistently updated, OSRS never lost that, and while certain gear may be less impressive today than it was in 2015 or 2005, new gear has taken its place. Seeing someone in Sanguine Torva or the newly released Radiant Oathplate armor, especially if they achieve these things on an Iron Man, is incredibly impressive. Just having that communally recognized value promotes more people to seek that recognition. After all, flexing your hard-earned achievements is a core part of existing alongside other people, whether it be in-game or not. World of Warcraft, at least right now, is failing to offer a permanent home for its players, asking them time and time again to recreate the same characters and re-experience the same events.
Bro, I wish Classic WoW Hardcore had these challenges. Goodness gracious, man.
Hey, that's not bad.
These are so
That's
cool.
the last Batwave. I have a decent amount of prayer.
This is exactly what I've been
56
asking
also had
for
a bit of
forever.
a sketchy lore, but not one that I haven't done before.
It's funny, I criticize retail WoW for becoming a fleeting, seasonal experience that devalues everything you've earned every new patch, but Classic WoW has become that too. With every new incarnation, it resets everyone back to 0 and asks them to run that treadmill again. Blizzard is plagued by the disease of seasonality. They seem incapable of creating anything outside of that paradigm because it is the only way to foster continuous engagement in their eyes. Perhaps that's more a fault of the theme park MMO than it is of their own creativity. The Season of Discovery, being seasonal in name, also operated this way. It had incremental level gates, 20, 30, 40, and so on, that acted like miniature expansion releases with a new raid, some new content, and new abilities and other stuff. Blizzard, being tied to this seasonal model, was terrified of making players feel like they need to catch up to their friends, so they caught up for them. Level boosts, experience boosts, and so on. It became so disconnected conceptually from the original classic, the original vanilla, the experience people originally connected with, that it asked them to skip it entirely. Expediting the leveling in classic is like offering maraschino cherries as the dessert itself. It's like the rosemary being garnished by the steak. It makes absolutely no sense and caters to a demographic of players that exist antithetically to an MMO. The genre is defined by persistent engagement, a world that continues living, but by promoting momentary engagement for incredibly short periods of time, you create artificial bursts of popularity and then long lulls where most prospect players don't want to join, because it looks dead. But here we are today. Players clearly want some kind of emergent experience in a growing game. One of my favorite examples of this was actually in Classic WoW's anniversary servers released only a little while ago. Fangs, a content creator-driven guild conceptualized by streamer Sodapoppin. It was a communal experiment, a creator house like you'd see back in 2016, but done in World of Warcraft. It was a persistently running reality television show that tested the mental fortitude of all those involved, because Fangs was less so about the game and more so about people interacting with one another through the game.
Who you think?
Look at that
speed. Oh my god, the holy shit!
No, P-Mob, you've gotten every single item!
You have gotten a lot of items.
He's gotten it, and it's good for Warrior! You've gotten every item, bro!
Listen. I'll pass if you come to my stream and rate my physique.
Wait, what?
Alright,
Holy you're shredded, bro! What the
I was not
Wait, is that a bodysuit? Wait, this
Wait, you're
guy is
massive.
shredded, by the way.
Wait, it's actually huge.
What's your body fat percentage?
I followed Tyler 1's journey through the guild's rise and eventual dissolution. Tyler 1 is, of course, another streamer, popular for his abrasive and somewhat controversial personality and exceptional League of Legends play. Never having played Classic WoW before, he ventured into Fangs with an open mind. Fangs was created on the hardcore server, meaning that if you die, you lose your character, and simultaneously, the guild ran alongside a host of add-ons, or in RuneScape terminology, plugins, that created race-driven competitions. Undead, Tauren, Orcs, and Trolls all competed against one another through this external system. There were raffles, battles, arguments, and everything in between. During this process, I watched Tyler 1 learn the game, go from meandering around, keyboard turning and sometimes forgetting to attack, to running a 40-man raid. His interaction with different content creators, his fabricated drama with Sodapoppin, his insistence to essentially roleplay a rise to power narrativized the entire experience. It did so well that when he died, it became a legendary moment within the community. While leading a raid into Molten Core, battling the fire elemental Baron Geddon, Tyler 1 was faced with a decision. Go for the kill, DPSing down the final few percent and healing through the AoE explosions, or play it safe, run away. His fatal call was to DPS, go full hog as they say, Zug the Zuggler, full send, and his shouts echoed through the voice call, unaware that many had already begun to run, because when a death means a reset of your progress, it's every man for himself.
Go back in. Everybody back in. Everybody back in. I'm death wishing. Big
Sony,
heals.
Sony,
Big
get out.
heals on me. Big heals on me. I'm death wishing. Big heals on me.
Holy shit.
Let the
It's
bomb.
him.
Big heals on me. Big heals on me. You can't listen. Finish it. Don't run. Finish. Finish. Don't run. Finish. Finish.
Oh my god!
The boss fell, but not without the death of many of those brave enough to fight alongside their war chief in his final moments. This felt like the end of the story, and for many it was. It was facilitated by Classic WoW, by the hardcore servers, by the raid itself, but this existed only due to the emergent methods through which these creators decided to approach this re-release. Why do I bring this up though? For an OSRS player, it may be obvious. This happens all the fucking time in RuneScape. Not on the same scale as Fangs and Sodapoppin's achievement of managing to wrangle in the egos of dozens if not hundreds of content creators for months was unlike anything I've ever seen, but in a microcosm, this is RuneScape's most common creator-driven element. The best comparison is Deadman Allstars, wherein a large OSRS content creator, Solo Mission, teamed up with Jagex by obtaining a custom server wherein 35 of the largest content creators in the game created teams of 5 in a full PvP version of the game. Almost every area became dangerous. In these servers, all 35 creators had expedited experience rates and drops, and a bit over a week of time to gear up for the finale. A King of the Hill style one-on-one deathmatch where they, donning the gear they've collected, were put to the test against one another. The 10-day period that this event spanned was amongst the most fun in the game's history, as following the individual and group-wide achievements and battles became so many people's day-to-day habit. The battles fought, the gear lost, the upsets, the strategies, the drama, it felt like a condensed version of Fangs buoyed by each creator's personality, loudest of which was Odablock. Odablock is the largest old-school RuneScape streamer. He, much like Tyler1, is an abrasive, controversial figure with a huge fanbase. He's also one of the best PvPers in the entire game. He was the captain for the Odablock Warriors, and throughout this event, they became, in some ways, the focal point, the core narrative. In the draft, Odablock recruited what was considered to be the strongest set of PvPers. They were the only ones capable of defeating the Solo Mission Snakes, a team labeled as this season's villains. This was because they had a rather toxic player that received a yellow card for potentially stream sniping. This was made worse by this player's previous history of less than honorable behavior, to put it simply. On top of this, many felt as though the Snakes didn't have a particularly fun way of playing, as they locked down a specific area of the game and farmed it, all the while taking on group fights to snowball their growing advantage. On the day of the finale, tensions were high. Odablock broke over 100,000 concurrent viewers, and simultaneously the Old School and RuneScape streams had a collective concurrent viewership of over 150,000. To say that this event gained traction would be an understatement. As the Warriors began their first fight, it wasn't looking good. Good players fell early, and in this King of the Hill style system, the person who defeated the other remained in battle, granting the opposing team the ability to snowball an advantage. The cards did not look to be in the Warriors' favor, but Odablock himself hadn't yet stepped in the ring. As the bell rung and his character moved in, he disconnected. His entire home was DDoSed, and the competition, for a brief moment, was put on hold.
Captain of the Warriors, what can he do to claw this fight back?
Come on, you are Odablock. Play like Odablock.
No, I think this is actually a tactical decision. With
Really?
his sigils, yeah. He's got the sigil of the
Interesting.
Meticulous Maid, so he's got that extra 40 accuracy bonus. So he can afford to sit in this tanky Verak skirt for some of the freezes.
That's
when
me
he
told.
knows.
Was it like instantly or after a little bit?
So, somebody did ask me, bro. It has to be because I didn't even start yet. I didn't even start yet. As soon as I crossed the border, I DC'd. Wow, that's so fucking cringe. I don't know what to do. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what to do. Because the phone, the hotspot just can't, it can't hold it. It can't hold.
Are you able to change house? People are spamming. I'm not sure if that's viable. Like, how long would it take you if that could happen? How long would that take you?
I could try it. Yeah, maybe like 5 minutes. I could just run to a different house.
He rushed over to a friend's home, mouse and keyboard in hand, in an effort to continue the fight. However, it just wasn't the same. It is one thing to play on a friend's setup, and that alone doesn't feel great. But to do so in such a high-stakes, high-skill competition, it's borderline impossible. While he performed admirably, his misclicks were noticeable. The precision needed to play Oldschool Runescape well is beyond any other MMO, so even a small change in setup create massive gaps in performance. Ultimately, the Warriors performed well, but they did not win. Their matches were the most watched, and in many ways, after their elimination, that story concluded. I bring up these two somewhat similar examples to showcase an overlap, a way to engage with the game that sometimes doesn't put the game first. This engagement uses it to uplift something else entirely, a community-driven event, a creator-designed story, a personally aspired to goal. The overlap between Oldschool Runescape and WoW Classic isn't systemic. These games aren't similar. As Sodapoppin said while watching some OSRS videos, RuneScape is the bane for WoW players. It utilizes an entirely different skill set that doesn't translate. You'd think that would be a point of aversion, yet it isn't, because the point of connection is far more important for a lot of people. WoW players might be looking for something more permanent as they currently linger in the seasonal lull, a period between when their progress finished and when they must start it all again. A point of reflection that surely has some ask, why do I want to do it all again? To summarize, the lull that World of Warcraft is in currently, as every version of the game is between releases, has made its most prolific content creators branch out. This may not be a permanent investment, but it surely is interesting to see. These two old titans of the industry are still rubbing shoulders, but the balance of power might have started to change. If there's ever a time to visit Oldschool Runescape, it's now, on the cusp of its largest update. The benefit of it being a curated sandbox is that each edition is additive. The game has only become larger with time. It doesn't cannibalize itself with seasonal content. That alone could be something interesting to players that have become so accustomed to being cannibalized. I was one of them, after all, tired of spending months earning what became cosmetic overrides devalued by a glut of cosmetic overrides. WoW felt like it was shrinking, not in player base per se, but as a world. With every addition, with every update, the amount of land expands, but the relevant content only inhabits a smaller and smaller fraction of it. It was refreshing to step into a world as persistent as my kitchen and the roof over my head. The long-form nature of Oldschool Runescape's progression incentivized me to pursue the grind, rather than recoil from it, because I knew that every time I inched closer to my goal, that goal wouldn't leap ahead by miles every half year. It would remain, and a new goal would be added somewhere between or somewhere after. Retail doesn't offer a home, even when the developers are hard at work on the player-owned housing system, because retail is as acommunal as possible. There is almost no emergence within its body because the intent of the game has disconnected entirely from its roots as an MMORPG. There is no core leveling experience, no overworld organization, no coordination needed for anything that isn't small group instanced content. It's a game split down the middle, a single-player lonely adventure through a barren overworld, flitting between checklist slop and the next instance dungeon, and the instance dungeon itself. For those that love this about retail, the ability to hop into a game and in a weekend find yourself caught up to everyone else, that's perfect, and likely why most would feel alienated by RuneScape. On the other hand, Classic WoW offers a bountiful leveling experience. The heights of only Fangs were never the raids, they were the journey to get to them. The leveling of Classic is, for those who do it, amongst the best gaming experiences because it effortlessly mixes flow state calm with heart-pumping danger, especially on hardcore servers. Oldschool RuneScape is something different. It is a game on a separate path. Madseason is a classic WoW content creator who has cataloged his journey into Oldschool RuneScape without guides, and for those who have watched his videos have surely seen, Madseason is pulling from game knowledge outside of his classic World of Warcraft pool because the skill set he obtained through WoW has not translated. But the appeal of slowly, often arduously moving through the world and becoming lost in the maze of systems and incomprehensible functions has evoked feelings that leveling in Classic once did. Not today, when leveling has become expected and understood, but back then, before the re-release, when every step felt fresh.